Welcome to From Head to Heart and Home. We are so thrilled to have you here to listen to this conversation today. This is a channel created by women for women, empowering you to take intentional action in creating the life that you want. With your hosts, Carla Center, subconscious healer, and myself, Shanda Soretti, certified coach. So, today, Carla, we are talking about a really fun topic called around showing up. We're going to leave it at that. Actually, we're going to see how broad or narrow we take this, but showing up. So, I think before we hopped on here, we kind of discussed a few things that we wanted to cover. So, let me just premise that, I guess, or first. And it's around showing up for yourself, showing up for your journey, showing up for your healing, and how incredibly important this is. So I'll let you take it away and we will see where this goes.
Okay. And I love this subject because we get so much on autopilot and we're just doing the things that we don't show up. We're not conscious. We're as we talk about me being a subconscious healer, we're letting the subconscious take the wheel, right? We just allow things to happen. Anything inspired, we just let go. We're just like, no, maybe this is what I want, but I'm not going to show up for myself. In our relationships, we're not making that connection and showing up in our relationships as well. Um, we're so busy doing the things, but we're not really there.
Yeah.
We're not there.
Yeah. And I love what you're saying about I'll see what happens, right? And I hear this language a lot. So for those of you who don't know me and don't know much about me, the words we speak, I pay a lot of attention to the words that we speak because there's a lot of insight into the specific words we choose. And so when we say things like, "Oh, well, I'll just see what happens," we are placing the power outside of us, right? We are choosing not to be intentional and not to take intentional action. So be very aware of that moving forward when you say, well, I'll just see what happens, and having kind of that laissez faire attitude of like leaning back. It's like, think of it as disengaging from your life as opposed to being engaged with your life. And my biggest thing around this, and this is something that I make sure that I share with my clients, it's really important, is that showing up for yourself, showing up for this work is a must. It's like when things get hard and things get tough, often what we want to do, our tendency or our fallback is to want to stop doing things. But that is exactly when we need the things the most, right? So I think of like somebody juggling a couple balls, right? So maybe they have maybe they have a some sort of a healing practice in place, a daily routine. Maybe they have a coach who they're working with, and maybe they work out. Those are their three like non-negotiables. And then all of a sudden something happens. Maybe they lose their job. Maybe they need to get an unexpected repair in their house, which costs a lot of money. Maybe they get sick and they want to drop those balls. But it's like that is the very thing that has supported you through this process. And this is when you need it the most. So I always say, when you feel like you want to stop doing the thing is when you need to do it most and lean in even more. And like you were saying, Carla, about I think you were mentioning something about our patterns, right? Like our
Mhm.
unconscious patterns.
Yeah.
That's what happens. We try to fall back into those old patterns, right? To create more of the same. But if we want to evolve and grow, we need to move beyond those patterns and create something different. So showing up means you show up even when you show up,
Right.
always, because, and you trust that you will get what you need in that process. It might not look how you think, but you will get what you need every single time.
Right. Absolutely. And when you're not doing the things for you, and many of us are taught, like Shanda and I've talked over and over again, how it's perceived as selfish. You're not, I'm not exercising. So you self-sacrifice yourself. You
Yeah.
like give everything up and you don't show up for you. And then you're stuck in that space. And say you do have stressful things like big home repairs or something with your health has happened. If you don't show up for yourself, you are saying, I don't care, I don't matter. And the more you give away your power, the more that those old coping mechanisms are like they're turned up. It's like you've made a choice, even though we don't want to admit we made the choice. You've made the choice to turn up the dial on all the coping mechanisms that you have, and they
Mhm.
take over. You are
Yes.
no longer showing up at all. They are just happening, happening, happening. And that's the path you've decided to take instead of the path towards what you want your life to look like. That intention that Shanda's talking about, it's I know when I first heard about having an intention every day, I'm like, what the heck are they talking about? That's like, this is what I want things to look like. This is what I want my day to look like. This is how I want it to go. And it's having that intention. And it's not like, okay, things didn't go my way, so I quit.
Right.
It's like, okay, this is how I want it to be. This is the glasses I'm putting on today.
Right. Yeah. And I love when you're talking about intention, something else that I always make sure that we have very clearly laid out is the end goal or the end game. So for some people, it might be like, what do they want to achieve at the end of this session? It might be what do you want to achieve in the next 6 months. For some people, it might be like, what do you want to achieve by the time retirement comes around? So always having an end goal in mind while not being overly attached to what that looks like specifically, right? We have to release those reins because there could be something bigger and better waiting for us. But if we don't have that end goal in mind, then it's like, how do we even know how to show up? How can we
Right.
show up? How do we show up? It's like if you don't have a target, you don't even know where to aim. So we need to
Right.
have an aim. And when we have that aim nailed down, that target nailed down, then we know how to keep showing up consistently in this type of energy with these type of aligned actions, right?
Right. Right. And having like not how it's going to happen, but like, so one of the things, because I work on relationships, is that we want a happy ending, right? That's been what we were taught. And not knowing really what you want in a relationship, but you continuously like, okay, I go through, and I'll use myself as example. I just thought I had a bad picker. Like, hey, I have a bad picker. Things aren't going to work out. But I was just continuously allowing things to happen, right? And I would do the same patterns, not recognize them. And guess what? You end up in the same results. And then you look at the other person and you're like, well, I just picked a bad person. Someday my knight in shining armor is going to come swoop in and, take care of me. And that's not the truth. That's not how it works. I had to sit down. What do I want in a relationship? What do I want in a relationship? And I get to do like, who am I in that relationship? I had to be intentional. I had to show up for myself. That meant healing myself and having intention about what I wanted going forward, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise, the most wonderful person can come into your life and you're not showing up for you, and you sure as heck aren't showing up for them
Right. Yeah.
because you don't know what it is. You just know you want that feeling of euphoria.
Right. And it's so true. When we show up for ourselves, we get this confused, I think, so often. When we show up for ourselves, we're able to show up for other people. It does not work the other way. It does not work. We show up for others and then we can show up for ourselves. It's like, no, 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 no. We come first. And from that full cup, we can then show up powerfully for other people
Right.
and to discern between it being selfish and it being all the other negative thoughts that people have when we aren't used to doing that, right? To discern between something being selfish and something being a priority, something
Right.
being nourishing, right? I'm
Right.
not talking about being selfish, I'm talking about nourishing your needs. That is so
Right.
different. And
Yeah.
nourishing your needs from a place of abundance and love, so that you can give even more than you knew and thought and could fathom before for others.
Right. Well, and if you don't show up for yourself, you're anticipating their needs, but you're not really connecting. You are not showing up for them in any way, shape, or form. You're just guessing at what you think they need, but you're not connecting with them and really knowing them in a way that can allow you to show up for them. And you can't do that without showing up for yourself because you're so busy. Like, I always think about a little mouse just running around trying to find its way out of the maze. And you don't have any ideas, say, because they always, their sense of smell is what gets them. You have no sense of smell because you're not connected with yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the word that you just said, connected. That's what I wanted to share as well. I was doing my meditation this morning, and that was one of the words that popped up to me, and I kind of sat with it for a moment, and I was like, at that time, what does connection need? And it needs many things, but one of the words that came up was time. You need to take the time to create that connection with yourself so that you can show up. So if we're not taking time, and by the way, making time, because we will always
Mhm.
make time for what we prioritize and feel is valuable or important. So we are taking the time, making the time to connect so that we can show up at a high quality or caliber for ourselves first and then for others.
Right. And you'll find that like your health and your relationships, the more you connect with self, it really does go up. It raises. It and the more we show up for ourselves, we're like, I had no idea that my life could look this way
Yeah.
because you didn't know that you wanted the things you wanted because that wasn't okay.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You didn't connect with yourself enough to really see the picture outside of what you perceived as what was going to make you worthy to want.
Yeah. And speaking of wanting, you must want your healing more than you want the comforts of staying the same. You need to want the results. And it's interesting because your life is proof up until now of what you have actually wanted, what you were willing to create. So, a lot of us, we don't know, but we aren't willing to get outside of our comfort zone, which is why we have the lives that we do. So, look at your life. Where do you not allow yourself to want the things, right? Because we can say we want things, but our actions are what actually prove that. So you must want it more than you want to stay the same. And like as a coach, I want them for you too, but I can't do the work for you. You have to do that work for yourself. I can do the work alongside of you and with you, but I can't do the work for you. So that's why Carl and I are really talking about this beautiful topic today, showing up for yourself, showing up for your healing journey, and doing the work, right? Because it is what will bring you the results and the life that you want, right? Through that,
Right.
through that showing up daily, no matter how small it might be, right?
Yeah, you have to be willing to show up to do the work and accept any stories you find yourself that you've been telling yourself and keeping yourself in that space.
Yeah. Yeah. And without judgment, I think it's really cool. Something that I hope I can remember this. I was meditating, and again, this phrase came into mind because it was about my intention. And today's intention, I just wanted to be open to receiving whatever it was that wanted to be received today. And the thought that popped into my mind was something along the lines of, how cool is it that we get so afraid of the things that come to the surface, like, oh my gosh, I don't know what's going to come out of this, I don't know what's going to come up, I don't know what can of worms is going to open, and we get scared, right, fearful of that. But I had a kind of a reframe this morning around that, and I was like, how cool is it that whatever comes up to the surface is what wants to receive love, what wants to be loved, not feared. It wants to be loved. It's the exact opposite of what we perceive it to be. It was like this weight just lifted, and I was like, oh, and I felt so relaxed, and I wasn't uneasy, and I just felt really, really good. So let's have that approach with, let's shake things up to see what wants to come up, to see what wants to receive the love in order to heal.
Right. And what we don't know until we know it, and have that compassion for ourselves as this stuff comes up and be like, okay, so now I understand what was going on. I know what my pattern was. I know what story I was telling myself. And now I'm free of it because I know what's going on and I can shift to something different.
Yeah. Yeah. And when we do this process of like shifting, like Carla was talking about, the compassion is huge, and so is the non-judgmental mindset. Right? We want to be curious. We always want to be curious, but we're not judging anything. We're not making anything right or wrong. We're not making it good or bad. We're not making it mean anything. We're just witnessing what is there. Because when we can witness what is there, it's almost like we can have a different perspective. It's like we're not so associated with it, we're almost disassociated. And sometimes it's that disassociation, that distance, that we need in order to gain the perspective that we need to heal, right? So um like sometimes things are a little bit too ouchy, or we're too clung or clinged to that thing, and we need to let go a little bit, right? So that we can actually see, oh, okay, hang on a minute, this is what's actually going on, and now I can see it because I created that space between me and it.
Yeah. Especially when we've been looking outwardly for the reason something's going on in our life, and we look inwardly and we find it and we're like, it was me this whole time. Um, and owning it, and that allows you to have that power, because as you look outwardly, you're disempowering yourself. You're not showing up for yourself because it's keeping you in the box we talk about often. Like, it's all of these reasons, it's X, Y, and Z. Then I don't have to show up for myself because it's somebody else that did it to me. And it keeps us stuck. It holds us in that, in our healing journey. Then we're in this spot and we're like, "Oh, well, apparently I'm not gonna get any further."
Mm-hmm.
And then you show up for yourself and you're like, "You know what? I'm gonna look inwardly and I'm gonna see where I am responsible for this. No matter what anybody else has done, no matter what my circumstances, where is it that I have decided I need to be in this space?
Yeah.
Why?"
Yeah.
And be curious, like Shanda said. Ask yourself why. What makes me feel safe here?
Mm-hmm.
Not happy, not joyous, but safe.
Yeah, and showing up for yourself can, depending on what season you're in, sometimes it's really easy, right? Because
Mhm.
we're in the flow and it's easy and we can show up and it's like, it's not even a question. Other times, that's not the case. Maybe we're in like a winter, like Carla and I have talked about, where things are extremely hard, even just day to day is hard. So, showing up for yourself gets to shift, it gets to look different. It doesn't always mean I'm going to do these 10 things every single day for the rest of my life and that's that. No, we need to meet ourselves where we're at while we're journeying through all of this, right? So we need to have that awareness of, hey, you know what? This isn't serving me right now, right? Like if things are super challenging, I always say like stay committed to your commitments for healing and growth, but it might need to shift. You might need to loosen the reins a bit and like not step back, but allow a little bit more space and grace to take place for that healing to continue. Because if we put too much pressure on, um, then you can derail your progress, right? And we don't want that to happen. It's like you need to kind of find that balance, right? It's always creating a balance with what's happening in your life and with the changes that you're trying to create. We can't go all in all the time. That's not how anything is. Mother
No.
Nature, like I always like to stress, is the perfect example of that. Summer isn't an all year round thing. Even if you have nice weather all year round, the flowers aren't always in bloom, right? So we can't always be in full bloom either. We need to realize when we need to take that time to go inward and develop our root system maybe a little bit stronger or a little bit more like connect to other things, right?
Right, because even tropical places have rainy season,
Mhm.
period. Even if they have sun all the time, they have rainy season because plants can't grow without the water,
Yeah,
right? You need
right.
that balance, you need both.
Yeah.
And, That's why sometimes when you're like, I just don't understand what's going on with me, you journal or you meditate and you write out things and you're like, I had no idea this is what was going on. And you're just compassionate and you give yourself grace and you're like, okay, this is something that's going on with me right now. Um, how do I want to move forward?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think one of the things that I've learned too about, like, I love journaling. I love putting my thoughts down on paper. And if you are someone who wants to do some introspection and really learn about yourself on a really deep level, then the type of journaling that I would recommend would be what's it called? Oh shoot, I'm forgetting what it's called. They call them, I think they call them daily pages or morning pages, something like that. So you don't have a prompt of any kind. What
Hmm.
you do is that you just start writing, and you just write, and it can be all over the place. It can be like what comes out will be everything under the sun. Your to-dos, what you want to eat, what you did yesterday, and then some really deep thoughts will start to come out if you stay in it long enough. So it's really intuitive journaling. That's the word.
Yeah,
Intuitive
yeah,
journaling.
yeah.
So it's literally picking up a pen and a piece of paper and just writing whatever thoughts, like a teleprompter, are going through your head, and just writing everything out. And if you stay in that process long enough, you'll start to get to those deeper, unconscious thoughts
Right,
and
right,
beliefs. So it's something that you could actually practice every day if you were willing to commit
right,
some time.
right. And writers do that. They do free writing is what they
Yeah.
call it. And that's how they come up with stuff too, because we're just purging out stuff. And then you're like, I had no idea. And that's the reason why we say it. You like find stuff out when you journal that you had no idea was
Mhm.
even going through your head because it's just because we're not conscious of the things that are just
Right.
our patterns. They're
Yeah.
on and on and on.
Yeah, and it's like if you think of journaling this way, like intuitively or freely, like you were saying, if we think of it like it's like sharing or
Mhm.
expressing without any type of limitation. So that's why sometimes I love journal prompts, other times I don't, because a journal prompt can keep you limited in what you want to express. So if you're looking for something specific, then yes, journal prompt could be great. But sometimes I feel like just free writing is way it's more well, we get to express, it's open, it's free,
Right.
right? So it's less constrictive and it's more expansive if we're really trying to get to learn about ourselves, because again, you're not constricted to a certain thought or prompt. It's like a box, right?
Right. Right. And we're instead of being in the trance, which we are over 90% of the time, instead of being in our trance, we're focused. We're focused on writing out whatever pops up, just
Yeah.
doing, no judgment,
Mm-hmm.
no like it has to be we're not trying to impress ourselves,
Right,
basically.
right, right. And it's a great practice, actually, Carla. I love that you're bringing us on this little tangent here, because it's such a great practice when we can write freely and express ourselves on paper freely, and do that at becoming like a habit. We can then adopt that into expressing ourselves in our lives. So, like using our voice, speaking up for ourselves, saying yes to the things that we want to say yes to. So, this is a really cool way to start to practice being able to express, first of all, who you are as you are, but also coming out of that shell and living the life that you want to live freely and openly, right?
Right, because if somebody doesn't show up for themselves quite often are people pleasers and they have no idea what their wants, their desires, and their thoughts are that come from their heart. They're so busy being somebody else that if you're free writing and you're intuitive journaling, all of a sudden you're practicing being you.
Right.
And you're like, because you're allowing your light out and it's safer when you're doing it for yourself than when you're doing it for,
Yeah.
out in front of everybody because you haven't felt safe in your life doing that.
Mm.
And that's a way to start because when you show up for yourself, we know that if you haven't ever shown up for yourself, that you're like, I don't know how that's safe. So here's a way to practice that, showing up for yourself daily,
Yep.
um, taking time to do it. That is showing up for yourself too, is doing it.
Mhm.
Period. Making it a priority and being like, okay, I want to know what I really want out of life besides surviving.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And if you haven't been somebody who has done anything like this in the past, showing up for yourself doesn't have to be extravagant. It doesn't have to be like, again, I'm doing 10 things every day for the rest of my life. Start small. Pick one thing, and do it for 7 days. Start there, right? Consistency is the key. It's the getting into the habit of making that a daily practice, right? It's about getting into that. I'm going to practice being me. Like Carla was
Right.
saying, I want to practice being me and feeling what that's like, because often we aren't ourselves, right? We have constrictions, restraints, limiting beliefs, pressures, all these things, right? Ideologies, all this stuff. So let's just shake that off for a minute and ask ourselves, like, what would it actually look like to live my life, to be myself,
Right.
and then what could come from there? What else is possible from me living my life for me and not somebody else?
Right. Beautifully said. And you'll find life is so much more joyous when you allow that. And the more you practice, the more it becomes natural, just like any other habit that we have in our life. It's oh gosh, no, I enjoy getting to see who I am.
Right.
And that's why starting small. And if you're like, well, I exercise every day. Well, why are you exercising every day? It that intention that we keep talking about, what's my intention? My intention is to just have this healthy body because it makes me feel good and because I want to focus on having my body be healthy for a long life. Or are you doing it just because somebody said you should? That's the thing about when you're like, am I showing up? Even times the things that Shanda and I say you should try doing, if you're doing them, what's the intention behind it?
Right. Yeah.
Are you journaling because Shanda and I said you should?
Yes.
Or are you wanting to because, "Hey, I really wanna get to know me because
Mhm.
I'm worth knowing."
Right. Yeah. And I love that you're kind of taking this a step further, and it's bringing me to the question of, like, it's not just about showing up and doing the work and checking off the boxes. How are you showing up? Like Carla was saying, the intention behind the why. So, how are you showing up to do this work? Are you doing it because you feel like you have to? Are you doing it because you feel pressured? Or are you doing it because you're like, this is what I want to create? And because this is what I want to create, I'm going to take the actions that prove that, which is
Right.
showing up, but showing up
Yes.
from a place of empowerment, love, abundance, and alignment with
Yeah.
my calling, my heart, my purpose.
Yeah, instead of being that because we were taught to be the little kid that does what we're told to do,
Right.
and then we do it because somebody said to.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true. It's so true. It's crazy because all of our limiting beliefs and programs come from the ages of 6 and under. So if we think of that for a second, this is wild. I read this in a book not long ago, or it was a quote, and it was like, all of our decisions are made from a 6-year-old brain or
Mhm.
younger. If we're
Yep.
not doing the work, all of our decisions are made from our 6-year-old self or younger, which is fascinating. So let's update those so that we can make decisions based on our us today, who we are
Yeah.
today, not as that scared little child or so on, so forth.
Right, right, because until age 6, we're this big sponge, and then all of a sudden and we're building all of those limiting beliefs
Mhm.
based on little snippets of our lives, and then we're stuck there, and that's who we believe we are, even though we know, I mean, in our soul, we know that's not who we are, and that's not the way we want our life. Um, and so that's why Shanda and I are like, "Oh, let's show up for ourselves. Let's
Yep.
figure it out. Let's see what me now really, really wants based on instead of the little 6-year-old who was like, "I just wanna survive this.
Right.
I just wanna get through this."
Right. Right. And it's like showing up even when you don't want to, even when it's scary, even when, and remembering that that gets to shift as it needs to shift, right? It gets to change as you change, and honoring that space for yourself to create those changes without judgment. It's okay
Yeah.
to have to create a little bit of space, for some time so that you can continue on, right? Because in my mind, creating space to allow that to keep going is better than stopping altogether, right? So
Mm.
it's about honoring what you need moment to moment, day to day in your journey.
Right.
Yeah.
It's that just honoring yourself because when we were kids, if things were rough, we're like, if I'm an adult, I get that freedom. And then you get to adult and you find that there's so many different things. So responsibilities we had no idea we had.
Yeah.
So that's when Shanda and I were talking before about there is no end to our journey. And why is that? Because we are ever expanding if we choose to.
Yes.
Because we're not saying you're looking for the solution to what's going on in your life. We're saying you get to find you.
Mm,
You get to find you. It's not solving a problem. And that's one of the reasons why we are so hard on ourselves, why we are so judgmental because we look at it as a problem instead of like growth,
yeah.
right? As a plant is growing, it's going to have leaves that die and fall off. Flowers are gonna bloom and then they're gonna die. And that's not an ugly thing, it's a beautiful thing, and it's celebrating its own journey. It's not looking at the dead flower that's losing all its petals and thinking, "I screwed up, I've ruined this." It's like, "What's next?"
Right.
And that's as you show up for yourself, that's where it is. You're like, "Okay, so this is dying off, but what's
Yeah.
next?"
Yeah. That's that hope and that excitement that I live by. Right. And I know you do too, Carla. It's like this journey is, it's like, it's so less about fixing ourselves, right? Because nothing has gone
Mhm.
wrong. There's nothing wrong with us. We're not
Right.
broken. And it's all about finding who we actually are, reconnecting, not even finding, reconnecting to who we are, right? So on this journey, you get to discover yourself, your most authentic, truest self, and that in itself is such a beauty, right? So I'd love to know, Carla, if there's anything else that you would love to share with our listeners today.
Just as you connect, and you might find I've found glimpses of things in my life as I reconnect with myself. I'm like, younger me knew this. Like, I remember knowing this, and I just made excuses because it didn't work out then. And then I just said to myself, this is not me. And it really was. So as you find that, be like, find it as a joyful thing, not as a sad thing, and know that showing up for yourself is beautiful. And it's not to say you were wrong before, it's just to say, I love me enough to care about who I am.
Right. Yes. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And with that, I want to thank all of our listeners for tuning in to our channel today from Head to Heart and Home with Carla and I. We love that you take the time to join us here and listen to our conversation. So if you enjoyed this conversation, then make sure to subscribe, clicking the button below so that you get our notifications of our weekly episodes that come out. And also be sure to hop on and join us next week for another connected conversation. All right, guys. Bye bye for now.
Bye.